My husband moved to Barcelona with his mistress while I was picking up our daughter, and then he came back. The message arrived as I was tidying up my daughter's toys. In seconds, my life turned to dust. My husband was gone. Not only had he left us, but he had fled to another country, with his mistress. And me? I was left with the emptiness, with a child in my arms and a world crashing down on me. In the days that followed, I faced silence, shame, and fear. But I discovered something I didn't even know existed. A hidden strength among the tears and the routine of a single mother. I began to rebuild my life with the few certainties I had left. And the truth, little by little, began to emerge. This is the story of a woman who lost everything but her courage. A mother who had to face betrayals, manipulations, and an unjust system to protect what was most sacred. And who, along the way, discovered she wasn't as alone as she thought. Thank you for being here. Follow along to the end and tell me in the comments which city you're from. I want to see how far this story can reach. The buzzing of my phone on the counter pulled me from the automatic trance of the morning. I picked up the device with a hand still damp from the coffee I had just spilled and read in disbelief. Good luck with the rent. Jonathan. For a moment everything stopped. Time air my body. I felt the floor disappear beneath my feet as my eyes remained glued to the screen, trying to process that set of words. As if each letter screamed his cowardice, I reread the message repeatedly, but it didn't change. My husband, or what was left of that word, had left me. And not just left. He had fled, vanished, abandoned me and our daughter without even looking back. Something inside me cracked like a dam about to burst. My chest filled with an emptiness so intense it hurt to breathe. I dropped the phone on the counter and leaned on the sink to keep from collapsing. Everything we had built over the years now seemed like a mirage. The trips, the dinners, even the shared silences. All tainted by this cruel farewell. He didn't explain, didn't justify, didn't have the courage to speak looking into my eyes. He just typed, clicked send, and destroyed my life. The kitchen spun around me and my mind tried in vain to understand why. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was a sentence. Lily and I were alone, and I didn't know where to start. How is this possible? I grabbed my bag with trembling hands and rushed to pick up Lily from preschool. The journey there was a blur of silent tears and honking horns I didn't even hear. When I hugged her, the sweet scent of her hair brought me back to earth. "Mommy, did you cry?" she asked, and my throat tightened. I smiled with effort, pretending, while my head spun in 1,000 directions. As soon as we got home, I ran to the computer, still wearing my coat. I opened the bank account with a pounding heart, praying for some stability, some cushion that would sustain us for a week. But when I saw the balance, my stomach churned. $412. That's all. And the rent was due in 4 days. And the pantry was empty. And Lily needed milk, diapers, everything. The joint account? Zeroed out. Lily's savings? Transferred. Jonathan didn't just leave. He made sure to erase every trace of the security I had tried so hard to build. The tears returned, but this time they weren't from sadness. They were from pure panic. I had nowhere to run. No time to think. I called the building manager, but he barely listened. "You know I can't wait any longer this month, Naomi. I'm sorry." Sorry. He was sorry? My heart pounded as I tried to keep my voice calm. I took a deep breath. I needed to act. Now, how will I pay the rent in 4 days? I lay on the couch with Lily in my lap, already asleep. Tears streamed slowly as my mind took me back to the beginning. Jonathan's smile in the church, the nervous kiss at the altar, the promise that he would always protect me. I wanted so much to believe. And I did. Even when he started coming home late. Even when he forgot birthdays. Even when he disappeared for hours with weak excuses. There were signs, I know. The way he hid his phone. The increasingly frequent business trips. The way his voice hardened when he talked about my emotional instability. After Lily was born, I chose not to see. I wanted to save the marriage for her. So she would have a home, a complete family, even if it was full of cracks. Now I realize he counted on that. On my silence. On my hope. Maybe it was easy to manipulate me because I was weak. Or rather exhausted. Taking care of everything alone without help, with a husband who barely showed up. That was already a form of abandonment. Only now, he had made it official. Irreversible. And cruel. My chest ached for trusting. for justifying the unjustifiable, for fighting so hard alone, thinking we were together. I blamed myself for every fight, every silence, every night he slept out. And now I realize, he had been leaving for a long time. How long had he planned this? The phone rang while I was organizing the month's receipts in an envelope. I answered without thinking, and Evelyn's voice cut through the air like a razor. Jonathan told me. You freaked out. You're putting Lily at risk. My blood boiled. Her coldness was nothing new, but hearing that, days after being abandoned, was more than I could bear. You don't know what you're saying, I replied, trying to stay calm. He did what he could. But you always unstable. Always exaggerating everything. She used a sweet, manipulative tone as if she were concerned. But I knew that call had a purpose. To plant a seed. To make it seem like I wasn't capable of taking care of my daughter. It was the beginning of something bigger. A plan. And I couldn't be naive anymore. Evelyn, if you're implying anything about my daughter's custody, you're jumping to conclusions. I trembled but kept my tone firm. She was silent for a few seconds before saying, I'm just worried about Lily's well-being. And she hung up. Like a veiled threat. A bomb about to explode. I took a deep breath and dropped the phone on the couch. She wasn't just an intrusive mother-in-law. She was dangerous. Influential. And now her son's accomplice. It was as if the two of them had rehearsed everything. As if there was a script being followed step by step. She's preparing something. The next day I went to Rachel's office, my lawyer. She listened to everything with an impassive expression, her eyes fixed on mine. The worst thing you can do now is react emotionally, she said. Her words were dry but accurate. You need proof. Not just of the abandonment but of everything. Messages, bank statements, any suspicious activity. I told her about the balance, about Evelyn's call, about my growing fear that they wanted to take Lily from me. Rachel wrote everything down. Let's start with the basics. I need copies of everything you have, bills, emails, screenshots. If Jonathan orchestrated this with her, he'll leave traces. For the first time I felt less alone. Less helpless. Avoid any confrontation now, even with her. You'll act coldly as if you don't know anything. Let us collect the necessary material. I agreed, breathing deeper. The anger was still there, pulsing. But now it had direction. I would have to use my pain as fuel. Channel everything into strategy. Rachel gave me a list of documents and folders to gather. I needed to stay focused. I couldn't get lost in despair. Or in hatred. The war had begun, but now I had an ally. I need to find something concrete. That night, when Lily was already asleep, I received an unexpected message from Lucas, an old friend of Jonathan's. You need to know something, it said. I scheduled a coffee with him for the next morning. I arrived with a churning stomach and a pounding heart. He was restless, looking around as if he feared being seen. Jonathan told me about Barcelona weeks ago. My world spun again. What? I asked, stunned. He said he was going to leave everything. That you wouldn't understand. And that Evelyn supported him. They had already rented a place there. I remained silent, feeling my face lose color. The pieces began to fit together. It wasn't impulse. It was calculation. Planning. He used Samantha's name to get a job there. She's already with him. It was all premeditated. Every word from Lucas was a punch. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was institutional, familial, legal, financial. As if I were just an obstacle to be coldly eliminated. I left the coffee shop short of breath. Jonathan hadn't fled. He had executed a plan. And he wasn't alone. Evelyn knew. Samantha helped. And maybe there were more involved. I needed to find out. Fast. Who else is involved? While organizing a forgotten box in the closet, I found a white envelope with a discreet blue ribbon. It was elegant, like everything Evelyn made sure to be. When I opened it, my hands froze. A card with meticulous handwriting and a clear note. For the beginning of the new chapter. 7,000 euros deposited today. Love, Mom. My heart pounded. Evelyn had financed their new life in Barcelona. With clean money. With pride. I rummaged through the envelope, looking for more clues, but that was more than enough to prove direct involvement. The card was dated 3 weeks before Jonathan's escape. They had plotted everything under my nose. The apartment in Barcelona, the move, the betrayal. Evelyn not only knew, she actively participated. It burned in my hands. How could she have the courage to write new chapter, as if it were a wedding gift? As if my pain was an opportunity for a fresh start for her perfect son? I felt such deep indignation that I trembled. That wasn't just a message, it was a signature. A confession disguised as a treat. She didn't just approve, she financed, encouraged, sealed it. I held the card carefully, trying not to crease it. I needed to show this to Rachel. It had value. Not just symbolic, legal. It was the first concrete piece that tied Evelyn directly to the escape. Did she finance everything? I showed the card to Rachel that same afternoon. She examined it carefully, wearing gloves as if it were a museum piece. It does have value. Especially with that date and handwriting. We can request forensics, and this could be considered proof of financial complicity. My chest filled with contained hope. It was something. Finally something. Preserve this like gold, she continued, placing the card carefully in a plastic folder. But it's still only one part. We need to connect this with bank movements, transfer records, exchanged messages. I nodded, understanding the scope of the strategy. Rachel thought like a surgeon. Every cut precise, every movement controlled. Seeing her professionalism gave me strength. As powerful, cold, and influential as Evelyn was, she wasn't invisible. Every weapon she used, every facade she created would leave traces. And Rachel would find them. I needed to keep searching, scouring every corner of my memory, my computer, my history. We agreed to gather more evidence over the weekend. I would go looking for emails, folders, documents, anything that could add up. The card was just the beginning. Now the hunt had begun. It's still not enough. I went home determined to access all the old files I had. I brought down a cardboard box from the attic, full of cables, hard drives, and an old laptop of Jonathan's. It took me a while to find a compatible charger, but when the screen finally lit up, I felt a chill down my spine. The password was Lily's name. Of course. Cold and predictable. I scoured folders and files, going through old photos, employment contracts, and email drafts. One of them caught my attention. Draft in a file under remove. I opened the file with sweaty hands. There it was. A rehearsed text, explaining why he needed to leave to preserve his mental health and his daughter's stability. The blame was all on me. On my instability. On my insecurity. He had been preparing the narrative for weeks. Another document was even worse. A cover letter for the company in Barcelona, with the address already filled in. The same one as the rental agreement I saw on the card. Evelyn was listed as guarantor in the bottom field. My stomach churned. They were organizing everything as if I were a disposable piece. As if my presence were a problem to be eliminated with documents, emails, and strategy. I copied all the files to a flash drive and carefully saved it. That was more than proof. It was the script of betrayal, calmly and coldly typed. And now it was in my hands. This could turn the tide. It was almost midnight when I found the file named Custody Plan Fee. I didn't recognize the name at first glance, but upon opening it, I brought my hand to my mouth. There it was in dry, formal letters. Shared custody with maternal supervision recommended. Considering clinical history of postpartum depression. My blood ran cold. They were using my pain as ammunition. That dark period after Lily's birth was real. And I sought treatment, I rebuilt myself. But now, he and his mother were twisting it as if it were a sign of incapacity. As if taking care of my daughter with tears in my eyes made me a threat. As if having faced depression was something to be punished, not acknowledged with empathy. I read each line as if every word stabbed me. Questionable emotional stability, observed isolation, tendency to chronic exhaustion. All written in a calculated way with brutal coldness. Jonathan had turned my most intimate pain into a legal argument. That wasn't just betrayal, it was perversity. I slammed the laptop shut. I took a deep breath to keep from screaming. I needed to stay focused even with a broken heart. I wouldn't let them define me by a diagnosis. Nor would I let them take my daughter based on lies. Are they going to use my pain against me? The next morning I took the file to Rachel. Her eyes scanned each line in absolute silence. When she finished, she took a deep breath and said, "They are building a dangerous narrative. But now we have a way to deconstruct it." She picked up a new folder and began to gather everything. Evelyn's card, the emails, the custody plan. This is the beginning of a strong dossier. We have concrete pieces, but we still need the final key. Something that proves intent to defraud or digital manipulation. Rachel was methodical, almost cold, but I felt her indignation. She was also a mother, and she knew the weight of that pain. We were facing a conspiracy that crossed the line of ethics. We organized the evidence chronologically with dates, senders, connections. Rachel drafted the first outlines of an emergency petition, but still hesitated. "Before going to the judge, I want more. Something undeniable." I agreed. What we had was strong, but the battle would be brutal. They had influence, resources, a network. I would search again. I wouldn't rest until I exposed every lie. Because now it wasn't just about Jonathan. It was about me. About proving that being vulnerable isn't being weak. That being a mother is fighting, even with a broken heart. The final key is missing. That afternoon, I received a strange email from Barcelona. The sender was Isabella Torres, an employee of Horizon Global, the company where Jonathan claimed to be starting. I opened it suspicious. She said she had received a strange message, supposedly sent by me, with a falsified resume and data. "Naomi, this application seems strange. Are you sure it was you?" I felt the ground disappear again. They used my name. They forged my identity. Jonathan, or someone connected to him, had created a fake email to impersonate me and generate some kind of benefit. Or worse, to create a history of professional instability, rejections, or inconsistency to use against me in court. It was a level of perversity I couldn't even imagine. I replied immediately, asking her to preserve the original email and send the full header. Isabella was helpful and surprised. "Can we talk via video? I want to understand better. I'm shocked by what I found." We scheduled for the next day. She promised to show me everything. If that was true, and I knew it was, it would be the digital proof Rachel so desperately needed. And perhaps the direct connection to the IP of the person who forged it. The plot was unfolding before my eyes, and I wasn't going to back down. Who forged my identity? Samantha appeared at my building's door with red eyes and an envelope in her hands. I hesitated before opening the gate. She walked in without a word and stood in the middle of the living room, as if the floor was fragile. "I want to cooperate, but only if I get immunity." Her voice trembled. The woman who destroyed my family was now asking for protection. I had to hold myself back from screaming. She explained, between pauses and sighs, that Evelyn had promised financial and legal support if she went with Jonathan. "But everything is falling apart," she confessed. I didn't trust her. How could I trust someone who got involved with my husband behind my back, and even helped him flee? But something in her eyes suggested more fear than guilt. And perhaps that could be used to my advantage. Before I said anything, I called Rachel, who told me to just listen and mentally record everything. "Don't give guarantees, Naomi. Just listen." I controlled myself. I took a deep breath. Samantha, still nervous, said she had documents, that she needed to clear her name, but it was impossible to ignore. She only came to me because something went wrong with their plan. Why now? With trembling hands, Samantha pulled a series of printed statements from the envelope. The sheets trembled as much as her voice. "It's an account in Liechtenstein. It's in Jonathan's name, but I was the one who made the deposits for him." I stood still, seeing the numbers jump off the page. $217,000 in transfers made over 6 months. A silent, meticulous, cruel diversion. My stomach turned as I realized that money could have paid for our daughter's future. Our debts, our plans. But it was hidden from me, from justice, from everyone. Samantha explained that Evelyn personally intervened to ensure the account was opened. She has contacts there. I just obeyed. The lump in my throat tightened. Evelyn was at every point of this scheme. "He said it was just a precaution, that your marriage would end anyway." Her words still echoed when Rachel, on the phone, asked me to take photos of everything and digitize it immediately. "This is what we need." This undeclared account could be the key to the freeze. My accelerated breathing matched the speed with which Rachel dictated instructions. I kept the documents as if they were relics. Samantha looked me in the eyes one last time and whispered, "If I had known what I was getting into, I never would have agreed." For the first time, I saw regret in her voice. More than $200,000? Rachel met me that same day in her office and spread the documents on the table. "We have grounds for an emergency petition. This account constitutes concealment of assets and an attempt to flee with assets." She began typing as if each word was a precise bullet. I felt like I was in a race against time, with every minute mattering more than the last. "We will file it tonight. The judge needs to see this before any international movement." Rachel was in attack mode, cold, direct, lethal. It was like watching a surgeon in full operation. And I, for the first time, felt part of something bigger than the pain. That was reaction. That was defense. That was justice being conceived. She included the statements, Evelyn's card, Jonathan's emails, the custody plan. Everything connected. Everything numbered. "I will ask for full temporary custody and an immediate freeze of linked accounts. If she denies it, we will appeal to a higher court." My eyes filled with tears. Not from sadness but from impulse. From movement. From a spark of victory. I left the office with my heart on fire and my fists clenched. Now it was justice racing against time. And I needed it to run faster than Jonathan. Will we succeed before he flees again? The courtroom was too silent. The cold lights, the hard benches, the distant sound of footsteps echoing in the corridors. Everything seemed to amplify the tension in my body. Rachel adjusted the paperwork with precision, while I could barely sit still. The emergency hearing had been scheduled for that morning, and Judge Mary O'Connell was already on her way. When she entered, the room seemed to change temperature. Rigid posture, analytical gaze, firm voice. "Let's get straight to the point," she said. Rachel began her presentation with the serenity of someone who dominates the battlefield. She explained the flight, the abandonment, the bank statements, and the custody plan. Each piece of evidence was presented in absolute silence, like bricks building a wall. On the other side, Jonathan's lawyer tried to argue based on emotional stability and lack of prior communication. "My client was surprised by his absence, Your Honor," Rachel countered. But he was not surprised by anything. He planned it. The judge observed everything expressionlessly, but her eyes were attentive, sharp, inquisitive. In the end, the silence was broken by a single sentence. "Judgment will be given now." My heart almost stopped. I closed my eyes for an instant and thought of Lily, of everything she deserved, everything we were fighting to preserve. "The decision comes now. The evidence presented is robust and consistent," the judge began. "I decree full temporary custody to the mother, Naomi Clark. Furthermore, I authorize the preventive freezing of all accounts linked to Jonathan Reed's name, pending further judicial review." The impact of those words hit me like a wave. I could barely breathe. The victory came embedded in relief, but also in urgency. Rachel touched my arm discreetly as if to say, "We did it." But the tension still enveloped me. Jonathan remained free, and Evelyn was a shadow acting on the fringes. Even with the favorable decision, I knew the battle didn't end there. It was just the beginning of a new phase. But for now, my daughter was safe. The judge withdrew and I remained seated, trying to absorb the magnitude of what had just happened. I carefully put away the documents, feeling the symbolic weight of each paper. Rachel was already preparing for the next step. Official letters, notifications, communication to the banks. There was no time to rest. Naomi Clark had won the first round. But Jonathan for sure would not stand still. And Evelyn. She never accepted defeat without a response. But he is still free. In the car on the way home, Rachel received a call. It was a source from the courthouse, someone who had already warned about silent maneuvers before. "Evelyn hired a digital expert. She's trying to trace your communications with Isabella from Barcelona." Rachel hung up and looked at me gravely. "She's going to try to disqualify your evidence. And maybe even accuse you of fraud." I felt a pang in my stomach. Evelyn didn't act in the heat of the moment. She was a strategist, discreet, and she had resources to manipulate the scenario behind the scenes. "You need to double your vigilance. Everything you send, everything you receive, archive it. Make backups. No evidence can disappear." Rachel was clear. There was no room for error. I returned home with a heavy heart, but an alert mind. Everything we had achieved could be dismantled if we didn't act with precision. Evelyn was the kind of enemy who smiled in court while pulling the strings backstage. But now I knew the game, and I was ready to play. I stored the digital evidence in 3 different locations, bought a new external hard drive, and sent a copy to Rachel. Evelyn could try to erase the traces, but this time I was 2 steps ahead. What will be her next move? Isabella's email arrived shortly after 8 in the morning. The subject line immediately put me on alert. Urgent application in your name. I opened it immediately and there it was. A copy of an email sent to Horizon Global, using my name, my photo, and a fake resume. It claimed I was desperate for work and had a history of professional instability. It was grotesque. My stomach churned. Whoever did that used real data mixed with carefully thought-out lies. The intention was clear: to paint me as unbalanced, disorganized, and desperate. A perfect image to disqualify any legal action I might take. I felt disgusted just looking at that text. Isabella wrote to me with concern. She said she found the tone of the message strange and decided to confirm it directly with me. The signature looked odd. The Portuguese was forced. It didn't match your previous emails. I thanked her immensely for reaching out to me. That woman across the ocean had just become an ally. I saved the original email, requested the header with metadata, and printed everything. Rachel needed it immediately. But as I organized the files, a question hammered in my mind. Does this affect my credibility? I called Evelyn before my anger completely took over. I needed to hear her voice, to notice any hesitation. She answered on the second ring with that polite, condescending tone. Naomi, what a surprise. I went straight to the point. Do you know anything about a fake email sent in my name to a company in Barcelona? There was a second of silence. I have no idea what you're talking about, she replied with a rehearsed calm. But something in her voice faltered. If you're implying I have anything to do with this, I suggest you find proof before accusing me. Her icy tone cut like a knife. But I didn't back down. Oh, I will find it, Evelyn. And when I do, you'll answer for every lie. She hung up abruptly without saying goodbye. That conversation proved nothing on paper, but my instinct screamed. She was involved. The attempt to appear indignant was too poorly rehearsed. She knew. Maybe she hadn't drafted the email, but the origin of that maneuver came from the same route that financed the apartment and manipulated Jonathan. I stared at my phone for a few seconds, my muscles tense. Evelyn still hadn't left solid traces, but it was only a matter of time. There's no direct evidence against her. Yet, Rachel received me without surprise when I showed her the fraudulent email. It was only a matter of time. Now we need to confirm the origin. She immediately contacted a trusted digital forensics expert, specializing in IP tracking and metadata analysis. We're going to find out where that message was sent from. That could lead us directly to the computer used. The expert began working that same afternoon. He pulled the data from the email header, analyzed the server hops, and identified the proxies used. There was an obvious attempt at camouflage, but with poorly erased traces. The person tried to appear sophisticated but made rookie mistakes, he said, pointing to the logs on the monitor. Rachel observed everything in silence, absorbing every detail. If the IP is traceable and linked to Evelyn or someone close, we have the missing link to incriminate her directly. I felt tense but also energized. For the first time, we weren't just reacting, we were getting closer to the source. I stood there, watching the real-time analysis, as if every second was a piece of a puzzle fitting together. And deep down I already felt it. We were about to discover more than we expected. Where does the IP come from? Rachel entered my house with an envelope in her hand and an urgent gleam in her eyes. We have an authorized RO. Now. It was the acronym for a judicial restraining order, and the judge had just authorized Jonathan's detention for attempted asset evasion and family abandonment. The problem? He had a flight scheduled for just a few hours later. We needed to act fast. While Rachel called the responsible officers, I prepared a backpack with documents and the flash drive containing all the evidence. Time seemed to speed up. Every minute lost was a chance for him to escape. The order needed to reach the airport before he boarded. It was a race against the clock, and against the system. Rachel called a court officer from the family court, who assured her that the order would be forwarded immediately. They will intercept him as soon as he steps into the international terminal. I tried to take a deep breath, but my chest wouldn't obey. If he leaves the country, it could take months until we can bring him back. The words hammered in my head. The road to the airport seemed longer than ever. I stared at the horizon as if my eyes could speed up the process. It was the last chance to prevent another escape. Will it arrive before the flight? My phone rang when we were 5 minutes from the boarding gate. Rachel answered on speakerphone. Confirmed. He was detained upon arrival. A collective sigh spread through the car. Jonathan had been intercepted with his passport still in hand, seconds before crossing the immigration gate. The feeling of reversal was so intense that I had to rest my head against the window to keep from crying. He had 2 suitcases and an envelope with euros in cash, the officer added. It was the escape blatant in action. Jonathan had no plans to return. He had given up on his daughter, on justice, on any trace of responsibility. That hurt more than any betrayal. But it also confirmed everything we had denounced so far. While we waited for further instructions, Rachel looked at me firmly. Now the question is, will he cooperate or resist until the end? We knew Jonathan could still try maneuvers, blame Samantha, say he was coerced, claim desperation. But the statements, the emails, the transfers, everything placed him at the center of the web. As much as justice was moving, the game was not over yet. The interrogation would be decisive. And Jonathan, being who he was, could flip the narrative at any moment. Will he cooperate or resist? Across town, Evelyn didn't show up at the courthouse that day, nor did she make any public statements. Her lawyer simply said she was emotionally shaken by the events. But the truth was clear. She felt the net closing in. And for the first time she chose to retreat. That coming from her was a strong sign. Very strong. Rachel cautiously analyzed the movement. She's not one to back down. If she's quiet, she's plotting something. But there was fear now. The account freeze, her son's detention, the documents presented to the judge. All of this pushed Evelyn into a position of fragility. And a fragile Evelyn could be even more dangerous. I, however, felt something different. It wasn't just fear, it was strategy. She needed time. She was preparing her next move. Perhaps a new lawyer. Perhaps a more subtle manipulation. Perhaps using the press, her contacts, or even Lily. Her silence wasn't peace. It was a storm gathering strength. As we drove home, I couldn't take my eyes off my phone. Every notification could be the beginning of a new chapter. A new attack. And this time I couldn't be caught by surprise. Will she hide or counterattack? The digital forensic expert completed the full report that morning. Rachel called me and asked me to come to the office immediately. When I arrived, she already had the papers spread on the table. 4 more hidden transfers were traced to the account in Liechtenstein, she announced in a low voice. The amounts exceeded $300,000. My entire body stiffened. Jonathan hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. He had built a financial web to ensure his freedom at my expense. The transfers had started even before Lily's birth. The diversion was old, methodical, and involved not only Samantha, but also suspicious signatures in Evelyn's name. It was deeper than we imagined. The expert highlighted inconsistencies in contracts with altered dates and access logs incompatible with the devices Jonathan usually used. It was clear that someone with more knowledge helped camouflage the movements. Rachel bit her lower lip, pensive. This could involve a larger network. We'll open the audit to other names linked to his social security number. I remained silent, just absorbing. That was more than a family scandal. It was fraud, corruption, identity theft. And now everything was coming to light. How many more diversions will appear? With the full report, Rachel wasted no time. She filed a new petition based on the discoveries and directly involved the public prosecutor's office. Now the civil and criminal spheres come into play, she explained. But she didn't just act in the courts. That same afternoon, local newspapers began publishing the first scoops about the case. Executive investigated for asset concealment and international flight with Mistress, read the headline. Evelyn was also mentioned as a potential financier and facilitator of the diversions. The media devoured the details as if it were a political scandal. Photos of Jonathan being led away in handcuffs from the airport were aired during prime time. I watched everything in silence. I didn't feel pleasure. I felt justice. The same society that always judged mothers as fragile now saw, live, a woman fighting for her daughter against a system of lies. Rachel was called for interviews and maintained her usual sobriety. It's a case of emotional and financial manipulation. And the victim is here alive. Evelyn's phone was turned off. Jonathan's LinkedIn account was deleted. The Reed family, which had for so long loomed over me like a shadow, now struggled to maintain appearances. Will their reputation survive? That night I found Lily asleep on the couch with her favorite book open on her lap. The soft light of the lamp cast shadows on her face. I sat beside her and just stayed there, watching her calm breathing, her small tranquil sighs. Everything I did, every piece of evidence, every confrontation was for her, so that she would never bear the blame for the mistakes of others. I kissed her forehead and pulled the blanket up to her chin. She stirred slightly, murmuring my name. My heart squeezed with tenderness. She was my root and my guide. And finally, after so much chaos, I began to see a line on the horizon. A line of possible peace, even if still distant. The noises of the world outside faded. Inside it was silence and affection. I felt a tear fall, but this time without pain. It was relief. It was overcoming. It was the feeling that no matter how much the world crumbled, love endured. And that was everything. Justice was coming. The masks were falling. And at that moment what mattered was the warm body of my daughter next to mine. Is this enough to start over? The courtroom was packed. Journalists, lawyers, court staff, and curious onlookers who had followed the case through the headlines. I sat next to Rachel, my hands cold but my mind clear. It was the end of a long war. Judge Mary O'Connell would enter at any moment to deliver the final verdict. I looked around and didn't see Evelyn. Jonathan, yes, was there with an empty expression. His eyes didn't meet mine once. Samantha didn't show up. The assistant judge announced that the session would begin in minutes. Rachel squeezed my hand discreetly. Today history changes, Naomi. I just nodded, feeling the weight of everything on my shoulders. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. She wasted no time on formalities. After a complete analysis of the evidence presented, and the proven attempts at evasion, manipulation, and fraud, this court declares. My heart pounded. Each syllable was a drumbeat inside my chest. I just wanted to hear and breathe, to breathe and finally exist again. Will she show up? Permanent custody granted to the mother, Naomi Clark. Fines applied to Jonathan Reed and Evelyn Reed for financial fraud and procedural bad faith. The words echoed like bells in my mind. Rachel squeezed my hand tightly, and at that instant the world stopped. It was real. It was official. It was justice. In every sense of the word. Jonathan kept his gaze on the floor. He didn't protest. He didn't apologize. He didn't get up. He just stayed there motionless as if defeat was expected. Evelyn didn't show up. Her lawyers didn't even try to appeal. This was no longer reversible. Truth had won. Lies had been unmasked. The judge concluded the session with a firm voice, without theatrics. The sentence was written. The case closed. I stood up in silence, still feeling like I was floating. It was the climax of pain, resistance, courage. And I was alive. Whole. Standing. Rachel smiled for the first time since the case began. You won. I embraced that victory as one embraces a child. With gratitude, with exhaustion, with soul. He didn't look back. A few weeks later, in another part of the city, I entered our new home with Lily in my arms. It was small, simple, but bright. We had windows with morning sun and a room all our own, full of drawings on the walls. The move was light. There were no remnants of the past. Just the essentials, the two of us. Lily ran through the living room with bare feet and loose hair. Is this our new adventure, Mommy? She asked with bright eyes. I smiled, knelt, and hugged her tight. Yes, my love. And this time no one will take it from us. It was a home. Our home. Not what I planned but what I achieved. The boxes were still unpacked, but there was no rush. Peace didn't demand haste. Just presence. Just truth. I lay with her in the hammock on the porch, and we stayed in silence, listening to the sound of the wind and the birds in the distance. For the first time in a long time, my heart didn't fear tomorrow. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The war was over. Justice had been served. And now all that remained was a new beginning. The beginning of one who survived and won. Finally, it's just us. Months have passed since the verdict, but I still wake up some nights startled, as if everything could come back. Then I remember where I am. In the small house with the smell of fresh paint, with Lily's laughter echoing through the halls. The fear still exists, but it has lost its grip. The silence of the night is no longer a threat. It's a sanctuary. I've returned to illustrating little by little. My style has changed. Before it was light, ethereal. Now it's firm, full of color and contrast. The scars have become lines of expression in my drawings, marks of what I had to face to move forward. Each stroke carries a piece of the pain, but also of the victory. The work has become a mirror. It reveals who I was, but also who I have become. Lily has grown a little through this process. She speaks with more confidence, asks profound questions, and learned the value of truth very early. Sometimes she asks about her father, and I answer honestly, without resentment. She has the right to know her story, but also to choose what to take from it, and what to leave behind. Today, watching her draw beside me, I realize that our strength was never in perfection, but in resilience. We were not saved by heroes. We were saved by ourselves. By every step, every refusal to give up. Life rewrote us. And, of all the versions they tried to impose, this is the only one I chose: mother. Free. Whole. Now, I'm curious about you who heard my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you experienced something similar? Support the channel, subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. I'm leaving another story on the final screen that you'll also like, and it will definitely surprise you. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.